As an integrative therapist, I have a variety of skills and tools that I use with each individual that comes in presenting with a problem. What I want to speak specifically about today, though, is EMDR. And the reason why I'm recording this is because I've had so many people have such wonderful results from using this modality. It's a specialty and it really does require specific training. I've noticed some fantastic results and I'd like to introduce it to anybody that's interested in learning about it. I feel I'm going to present it as psychoeducation first, and then I'm going to let you know what the sequence is and what to expect should you come in and we do sessions on EMDR. So basically, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. There's EMD, there's EMD little r and EMDR. Now, they're all very similar, and one is, containing, one is restrictive, and one is more broad. But you don't need to learn the absolute specifics right now. All I want you to do is get an idea of what to expect, what it actually is, and what you will do with me in session should you wish to come in. EMDR is really useful and effective for trauma and anxiety, but it's also very useful for OCD, depression, addictions, a variety. In fact, it's a matter of being creative enough, following the principles, and allowing desensitization to the issues that are causing you sensitivity to maintain the problem. So I have some notes that I have prepared that I usually issue to clients, and I just want to give you an indication of what I do. So trauma involves the past, okay? Traumatic memories are processed differently to non-traumatic memories. And so it's quite obvious in this paragraph that we can say that reprocessing becomes extremely important. Many individuals use avoidance and distraction. This is not helpful. I quite find when I ask clients, well, what have you been doing? And then their answer is, well, I've been using this technique, or I've been distracting myself using this, or avoiding using that. And then I ask, well, how long have you been using these self-techniques? And it could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So clearly it's not working if you're still experiencing the exact same discomfort or problematic issue. EMDR does the absolute opposite. So I understand that it can be quite frightening to hear that, oh, we're not going to be distracting and we're not going to be avoiding, because people find themselves in the habit of avoiding and distracting. EMDR is the opposite, in fact. So I like to explain the process of EMDR so that individuals can be prepared and to give permission to do this type of therapy. I hope that individuals feel comfortable enough to give it a go. After all, if what they have been doing, like I said earlier on, has not worked, well, what they've been doing has helped keep them stuck, has it not? So perhaps now it's time to move in a different direction, if and when one is ready to make that decision. One of the reasons that we use EMDR is to help reprocess the traumatic memories. Research shows that EMDR is very effective for many clients, and it assists with better sleep, a greater feeling of calmness, a general well-being of feeling better, less post-trauma symptoms, and just much more comfort and not that feeling of sensitivity and anxiousness and fear and worry. If we can safely say that the event has passed, and it's the emotional relationship with the event that is keeping one stuck, and that relationship with a particular or specific event is what's, let's call that the dominating factor, causing all the other symptoms and the problems, then the idea is to change the emotional relationship to the event and the way that it's remembered. Unwanted thoughts, unwanted sensations, and emotions are generally what bring individuals to therapy. So while someone can think of something logically, well, the problem is how they're actually feeling. And so that's what it is that brings them to therapy. Quite often we can handle the thoughts, but it's how they make us feel that we just can't get through the day. And then we feel stuck. So individuals become stuck, and past memories and distressing events keep them stuck because of the relationship they have with them. This also leads people to avoid other people, to avoid places, to avoid other situations, anything that's going to remind them of the traumatic event. So that's the purpose of EMDR in a nutshell. I have a workbook that I use when I'm working with clients. And as I bring that up to my screen, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what I do and how I do it. First of all, we start with target sequence planning. Well, actually, not first of all, but I'm going to only explain it to you in the order that I have my paperwork and my worksheets formatted. So right at the beginning, we do target sequence planning. What we're looking for is that negative cognition. That's the first thing that we work on. And what we do is we agree on what the presenting problem is according to the client. And then we move to what the associated emotions are. Quite often they can be fear, anger, sadness, disgust, terror, rage, apprehension, boredom, loathing, grief, and whatever else that the client says is an emotion that they experience when they have this presenting problem. Then we move to the sensations that the client experiences. So we do a body scan, top down, for any associated sensations with the issue that they're presenting with. So we ask, when you bring this issue to mind, what do you experience in your face, in your jaw, in your neck, in your shoulders, in your back, in your chest, in your arms, your hands, your abdomen, your hips, your buttocks, your legs, and your feet? And anything else that they want to bring up. See, note taking is really important, that we take notes so that we can always jot down keywords on what the clients have spoken about. We ask, have there been times in the past when you have felt this worry or this experience or similar issues or concerns? Are there times when you've experienced these emotions or these sensations and or similar events? And the client will either answer yes or no. If they answer no, there haven't been times in the past, then we're going to move straight to the next section, which is on the positive cognition. But if the answer was yes, there have been times in the past, then we explore this, just using a couple of examples of when they have felt this way before. We're looking for a relationship, a pattern perhaps. So then what we narrow in now is the negative cognition identification. Is there a theme, we ask, that identifies with these events, these sensations, and or these emotions? What is it that they have in common, perhaps? So then we call this the negative cognition. And it's usually an I statement. It's where the person comes to believe that the issues that they are describing to you reflect something negative about themselves. Some examples are, I don't deserve to be here, I don't deserve to be happy, I am not good enough, I'm worthless, I am bad, I cannot trust myself, I cannot protect myself. So there we have it. We write down what their negative cognition is, and remember, it's an I statement. Then we summarize this negative cognition. We summarize what the presenting problem is, what the negative cognition is, the associated emotions, associated sensations. Now, we also use a temperature check, and it's where you look from 0 to 100, and it's a distress check. So 0 is there's no distress at all, and 100 is extremely, totally distressed. So we ask them where they are on that temperature. It's called the subjective units of distress, SUDS, or we just use friendly language and call it temperature check. So we ask, now we move on to timeline of events that are consistent with a negative cognition. So this is the part where we asked if there were times in the past that they had this negative cognition, when they experienced it, perhaps when they experienced similar sensations or similar emotions. We look for the earliest memory. We call that the touchstone memory. And we ask, what was that specific memory that you can remember where you experienced that thought? And then you move up the timeline. So the earliest and all the way, so it's the past, then you set the present, and then you keep going to the future. And you just write down what they remember, even ages. These are really good handouts, by the way. I did this course through Dr. Jennifer Sweeten, and she did such an amazing job explaining so well every phase and every stage. And it's the handouts that we use with her permission, and of course with my own creativity and what works with my private practice. So I am very grateful to Dr. Jennifer Sweeten. Now we move to target sequencing for positive cognition. Similar to what we just did, but that was the negative cognition. So now we say we're looking to identify a positive cognition by saying, okay, so if you have that negative cognition, what would you rather think instead of that negative I statement? So for example, if their negative I statement was, I think I'm bad, then you invite the client to think, well, what would you prefer to think instead? And then you write that down. And then you ask them, so if you're having that I statement of a positive cognition, and just imagine that, then what are the associated emotions? Are they, for example, joy and happiness and pride and hope, optimism, peace, contentment, and anything else that they say that they experience as emotions? And then we scan their body, top down again, for any sensations that are associated with a positive cognition. So we ask, if you were to believe that thought, how would it feel in your face, your jaw, your neck, your shoulders, your back, your chest, your arms, your hands, your abdomen, your hips, your buttocks, your legs, and your feet? Just like we did that scan earlier on for the negative cognition. And we inquire again about their past experience. Have there been times in the past when you have felt this way or experienced similar thoughts, emotions, or sensations? If they say no, then, well, that's what you need to do. But if they say yes, again, like we looked at the earliest memory and then to the which was the past, and work our way up to the present and thoughts about the future, we document that again. So sometimes there's situations where clients come in and it's not so black and white. They don't say, this is the problem, this is the negative issue that I'm experiencing. So what we need to do then, so that we don't get stuck, is give blank pieces of paper. And what we call it the negative neural network mapping, where they just write, and then they connect and they write. And there's examples of this on YouTube as well. And they map their negative thoughts and what they remember and what they have felt, etc. And somehow through that, we find connections, relationships, and something will stand out, and we don't rush the individual either. And there they find their negative cognition in there as best as they see fit. And we do the exact same thing with the positive neural network mapping if they can't think ahead and create a positive cognition. Resourcefulness, inner resourcing becomes extremely important because we want clients to be able to seek resource states, have somewhere to go to keep themselves safe within themselves, and to practice this very regularly between sessions. And have it as a skill for always. Some people who do not do EMDR still use these examples that I'm going to ask. So one of them is we work on a container, a mental container, and it becomes a place where they can put their stuff in and take their stuff out. But there's rules to this container, and they create this container all by themselves. Rule 1 is the container must have a way for them to put their emotional stuff in and a way for them to take it out. Rule number 2, the container should be welcoming on the inside so that their stuff will want to stay there. Rule 3, the container must be large enough to hold all of the stuff that they have. And rule 4, the container must not be attached to them in any way. For example, not in a bum bag, which is attached to them or hanging off them. And so then the individual is free to create, draw, jot down, whatever it is, but attend to creating their own container. And really, the container can change over time. Great tool, and it's useful for kids as well with busy minds. They have containers and they put some of their worries in there, and works for adults as well. Another resource, secure place. So this is another worksheet that the client has the opportunity to choose a secure place. That's step 1. So it's recommended that the secure place be a real place that they've been to if possible. Step 2, they're given the opportunity to describe on paper their secure place. Connect with what they see, what they feel and smell and hear around them whilst they imagine that they are there. I invite them to jot down all of this information, be as creative and as detailed as they like to be. Step 3, assign a word. And this word will describe their secure place. One that will activate thoughts of this place when they say or think. So that way it's like an NLP technique. They just pull out the word and that's it. I'm going to my secure place. A beach, a park. It can be anything that's important and relevant to that particular individual. Okay, I also introduced the distress thermometer. Again, like I explained a few moments ago, where 0 is total relaxation and 100 is the worst distress, 50 is neutral. What I explain is we identify situations, people, places, or memories that are distressing to varying different degrees, like increments of 10. I give clients the stencil of the thermometer with like 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 100. And I invite them to give themselves the opportunity to write down next to the number that best represents how distressing an experience has been for them. To the best of their ability, to try and provide an example of almost every line, if possible. So they'll write something that was of very strong relaxation, and that's a level 10, or a level 70 is like moderate distress. So that way they can, it's a great way for self-assessment as well, and for me to know what kind of things land on their scale. Now we come to a really important part. So all that work has been done. Now we come to accessing and activating. And again, I use the worksheet from Jennifer Sweeten, and I modify it according to whatever other modalities and techniques that I wish to use. And I also bounce off each individual. I don't like to just stick to one model, and if it's not working, I persist. No, if it doesn't work, we change course, because that's how we get results. We form a really good partnership, a therapeutic one, and then we see what's working and let's go with that. What's working, let's go with that. That's not working, well, let's try this. So we become flexible, and with my experience, flexibility always leads in the right path. Okay, with accessing and activating, step 1, we identify our stop signal. Very, very important. The client can just put their hand up or just time out, whatever it is, as long as we both know that whatever that signal is and whenever it's used, that means we stop. That way I like to be able to receive a signal that, okay, the client's feeling overwhelmed and would like to stop. Okay, so step 2, after we've established the timeout or stop signal, I ask, we've identified the target, the negative target. We want to begin to access the neural network of the target. And so I'd like you to bring to mind an image of the worst and the most intense moment of the incident. And when that's done, when they've brought that to mind, they let me know that they've done this. Then, and that's the part that I say that's the opposite of what most people do, because usually they're distracting or avoiding. Whereas here, we're actually inviting the image, the worst part, to come to mind. We then pair that negative image and their negative cognition. Remember the negative I statement that they did earlier on? So it's like, how much worse can this get? But believe me, this becomes really effective as part of the therapeutic process. So the negative part of the image, the negative cognition, you pair it. The reason why we pair it is we want them to access this network at a deeper level. So they hold it in mind, and as they continue to hold it in mind, the image, along with the negative cognition, they begin to check in with their emotions, noticing anything that may be present. Some clients notice the presence of multiple emotions, while others may not notice anything. So we just ask, what is it that you notice? We just go with that. And then we identify any associated sensations. So we just done the emotions. Now we're looking for, are there any sensations that have come up for you? Again, holding that negative image or the worst part of the image in mind, and the negative cognition as well, the I statement. Now, do you notice any sensations or experiences in the body that seem to go with the negative image and the negative cognition? So we ask, what is it that you notice? Now, you remember we spoke of the temperature check? This is the part where we do a temperature check. Now that you've accessed this network, including the negative cognition, the image, the emotions, the sensations, so that's the whole network, let's do a quick temperature check. Using that scale that I described between 0 and 100, where or 1 to 100, where 1 is no distress at all, and 1 is the worst distress that you can imagine. What is your distress or your temperature right now? And you wait for that number. Quite typically, it may be 75, hovering around there. It could be anything, but I'm saying quite typically. Now, earlier on, when we identified the positive cognition, which is, if you remember, what would you like to think instead of that negative cognition? And you remind them of what their positive cognition was that they identified with, because of course we take notes and we have them there. So We don't vary it. We use exactly their words. And we ask, does that positive belief still fit for you? Because here we're giving them an opportunity to say, no, I want to change it. Well, yes, it still fits. So after we establish that, I want you to hold in mind, I say to them, that positive cognition along with the worst part of that memory that you bring to mind again. The reason why we do that is we're now going to evaluate the validity of the positive cognition. So this is how we do it and how we ask it. When they bring their positive cognition and that very negative, worst image to mind, we say, I want you to evaluate how true that positive cognition feels right now. Not how it felt in the past. You know, probably in the past you didn't feel that that was true at all. But right now, that positive belief or cognition, where the scale now is the validity of positive cognition scale is actually between 1 and 7, where 1 is, no, I don't think that positive statement is true at all. And 7 is, yes, it's totally true. I totally believe my I statement. So we ask them to make that rating. So with all these steps that we've done, remember, we've just done access and activating. So we've accessed the negative, we've accessed the negative image and the memory and the negative cognition. And then we've also accessed a temperature check, and we've also accessed and paired the positive cognition, and then did a validity rating of between 1 and 7 to see how true that feels for them right now. So we document absolutely every single response. And what we do is there comes a time where we have to re-access the negative image and the negative cognition, and we get a final temperature check to ensure that there's enough activation. Because if their temperature is like below 30, it's not activated enough. So we want a lot more activation so that we can actually work with the worst part of the memory paired with that negative cognition at that time. Because that's what we want to desensitize to. So activation is extremely important. So as I continue, there's a technique that Jennifer Sweeten speaks about when I did the course, and found it quite interesting, and I do it regardless. And it's about building attunement, and to enhance attunement, Jennifer suggests sit across from the client, right brain to right brain, which means your left shoulders are pretty much across from or facing one another, and you'll each be sitting to the right of one another. So I just do that anyway. And I'm just mentioning that because I find myself in different positions when we're doing CBT or tapping or hypnotherapy or whatever it is that I'm doing, whatever modality. But this tends to be my positioning when I'm with a client and we're doing EMDR. So I've stuck to that and I quite like it. Whilst we're in that attunement position, building position, I do lead the client into that resourcing exercise. You remember the container that they create and the secure place. And I'm also open to doing other resourcing that I think may be useful for that client. Or that client may say, well, this is what I usually do and this is what works for me. So why change it? I mean, we can always introduce and add to skills, but, you know, they are experts too in their own right, as are we. So exchanging information and what works goes a long way. So we're getting into the phase of the bilateral stimulation. Jennifer Sweeten talks about placing hands on knees as you sit with the feet on the floor and have the client mirror you doing the same. And you gently begin tapping your legs with each hand. And I know you can't see my legs, but I think that the instructions are quite simple and easy to follow. And you keep your wrists on your legs as you tap each leg. And you're sure to tap very slowly, about one tap per 2 to 3 seconds. So there's a really good science behind this that you can research on your own if you like, but it's not really necessarily for me to outlay that right now. Now we're moving on to installation. This is a really good phase, and for me it becomes a really exciting phase because I love seeing the results, and it's really amazing working with the clients because you do partner up, and the feedback and the results, or watching the temperature go down or the validity go up, it becomes really rewarding as a treatment method. So installation step by step, I'll explain to you. So step 1 is, now you ask the individual, bring to mind an image or other sensory experience of the worst part of the incident. At the same time, bring the positive cognition to mind. And then step 2 is, and you give them that time, you get to see with their breathing and their own internal focus that they use, that they're following your instructions, basically. Step 2, now with the image and the positive cognition in mind, we ask again like we did earlier, does this still fit? Is this still the same thought that you want to have when you remember this event? If not, is there a different thought that you want or that you think would fit better? And you give them opportunity to think that they'll stick with that positive cognition or make the necessary change to a different I statement. And then we move to step 3. So when you think of that image along with the positive cognition, how true does that thought feel now? And you ask them to rate that on the scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is that they do not have any belief in that positive thought at all, and 7 is, oh yeah, I totally believe that I can have that I statement and have that relevant for that negative thought. Then whatever it is that they answer, we just go with that. Now we start about 15 seconds of the bilateral stimulation, and we do that slowly. Then we ask for the validity of the cognition after each bilateral stimulation. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the bilateral stimulation. Again, like I said at the beginning, I'm not going through exactly step by step, so I'm still going to speak to you about that. When the validity of cognition stops changing, or when it reaches a 7, then we go to the next phase. Now, if you remember right at the beginning, if it's just one specific issue that they come in with, we'll do just EMD. And I don't want to, because this is such a long video, I'm not going to go through EMD and then EMD little r and EMD big R separately. I'm just going to jump straight through to the big one, which is the EMD big R. Now, do you remember I said to you that we do bilateral stimulation? You may be wondering right now, well, where's the eye movement stuff? When does that happen? So I'll tell you, because I wanted you to hear a lot about what we do, how we do it, and what to expect. You see, when clients have this information, then it's psychoeducation. People want to know what, and they want to know why. And so putting it out here in a video, then at least you know that if you come in for an EMDR session for trauma or for anxiety, then you know that, okay, I saw that in the video. That's how she explains it. And if you want to wonder where I got it from, I've also told you that as well. I use what I've been taught from different EMDR small workshops books and manuals, and I've done the intense training as well with Dr. Jennifer Sweeten. So EMDR, step by step, we've done the resourcing, we've done the target sequencing. Now, do you remember we were doing the access and activate, where we establish the signal, like the timeout, and then we bring to mind the positive cognition and we rate that, and then we bring to mind the worst memory and the negative cognition and whatever emotions, sensations, and then we do a temperature check. Okay, I said that really fast because I said it a bit slower earlier on. The desensitization, this is how it goes. We do about 30 seconds to 180 seconds of bilateral stimulation. Now, we can use 2 fingers, and of course, we establish an agreement, me and the person in front of me, as to the distance and to the speed. Now, with desensitization, we do it faster, whatever bilateral stimulation that we're using, but for the other phase, installation and reprocessing, we do it slower when we're installing. So what we do is the bilateral stimulation. Okay, so you follow the eyes. What I do though is I've got headsets, Bluetooth, wireless, and I have the auditory bilateral stimulation. I find I use more than one. If clients wish to add the eye movement, now they do say the eye movement one has had better results, but you can get great results also by using other methods. And that's why I choose the auditory ones, because I've had great feedback about it. And according to research, you can do more than just one. So whilst they have their headsets on and they're hearing one beep and then one beep and then one beep, I also, if I find it's appropriate at that time, ask them to look left, to look right, to look left, and to look right. Can be done with their eyes closed. It can be done with their eyes open but focused down as they're bringing that image and the negative cognition to mind. Or I jump in if I find it necessary, and I use my fingers as well. There's other methods. It can be tapping as well. And let's be honest, there's drumming, which I don't do, and there's walking, again, which I don't do. But there's many different ways. But in my therapeutic space, I have found, and I will always use the auditory and the eyes. And there's also a light stick that you can use where the light moves from left to right, left to right. So now you know what the bilateral stimulation is. So I do all of that. And after each one, and again, they're between 30 seconds and 180 seconds, I ask, what did you notice? And we just go with that, and we just keep doing it, and we keep doing it, and we repeat it. And then we do a temperature check, and quite often, almost always, actually, I have to say that with confidence because of the experience that I've had, the temperature goes down, 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 down. We repeat this, and we just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And we just go with what the client is experiencing and noticing. And then we stop with the temperatures about 10 and under. And yes, this does get achieved. With EMDR, we then do our body scan. With EMD, we do no body scan, but I'm just adding that in as just extra information for you to know. And then when we go to the installation phase, which is bringing the worst part of the memory with the positive cognition, of course, we ask, just again, is that still the correct I statement that you want to use? And then we ask again, when you bring that image to mind, what is it between 1 and 7? How true do you believe that to be? And we do the bilateral stimulation with that as well, slowly for 15 seconds or so. We ask for that rating between 1 and 7 after each one, and we keep doing it until the 7 is pretty much reached. Then it comes to closure, and we practice resourcing and stabilization as needed. And we process the session, we highlight any progress, feedback, just have the general conversation. We set up a time, maybe for a follow-up, phone call, email, anything that's useful and needed. And we go over the next session plan as well. So all that sounds huge, but I break that up. What I have found is, because it can become quite exhausting, is we do a lot of the background work in one session. Then on a different session, we start the desensitization or the bilateral stimulation work, because we need that full time, and we don't want to cram in almost 1 hour of documentation and researching and planning, and then the individual becomes exhausted and we don't do the EMDR sensitizations as good as a fresh person. That's it in a nutshell, or maybe it was a very big nutshell, but I wanted to explain it. I wanted to use my psychoeducation. I wanted to outline what notes and worksheets that I use. I've also mentioned several times, and I'll mention again, this is from Dr. Jennifer Sweeten, and I've loved how she's presented the work. You can look her up all by yourself. And if you are looking for an appointment or any other information, you're more than welcome to contact me on amanda@positivethinkingclinic.com.au. And I'm really happy that I use EMDR in my sessions. Thank you.